Hi, I'm Pat McDaniel and we're at Red Pine Quilt Shop this morning, and I'm going to talk about doing prairie points and some of their uses. I like to use prairie points to add interest to a quilt and texture. This is a quilt I've made, and you can see there are little prairie points here that add a dimension to the quilt, and then there are different prairie points going around the outside edge of the quilt. So those are two uses of prairie points in this quilt. And I'm going to focus on using a prairie pointer by Susan Cleveland to make my prairie points. It's a tool that I've had for a long time, but it is still available. To start using it, you take a square of fabric and press it in half. A square any size works. Then you take the prairie pointer and you put it on your square of fabric that you've had folded down into a rectangle so that the lines on the thing match up with the size of your square. My square started out at 5 inches. I like to give it a little spritz with some magic and then fold this down till it comes to that line going down the center of the tool. And this gets very hot because it's metal, so it adds to the pressing power of it. Fold the other corner over and press it flat. After it's quit steaming, or when it's pressed enough, I pull the prairie pointer out and continue to press my point just a little bit. And there you see with that spray on it, it keeps it nice and folded. So some other uses for prairie points include a hot pad I've made, where you start in the center with 4, and then the next strip out is 8, and then there's 8 around the outside edge. So that's one use of prairie points. Another way to get the prairie point, like on this quilt, where it has that stripe down the center, you take a square of fabric, or 2 pieces of fabric, and this one intentionally, the brown is a little bit. They're both the same size, but I'm going to end up folding it with the width of what I want my stripe to be when I fold it the first time over, and that might get cut off later. It doesn't really matter. Again, I'll take my spritz and do a little bit of a spray on it. Put my ruler in there, my prairie pointer, line it up on the edges and up there on the point. Fold this down so it comes to the center and press it. Bring the other edge down so it comes to that center line and press it. And again, the ribbon on here is so that I don't burn my fingers when I pull it out. Pull that out and you can continue to press a little bit. And it makes a nice sharp prairie point. I found recently that I can also use the clover hot hammer, whatever it is. Again, you start by folding your fabric in half. Sorry about the names on things. I'm not that good at remembering names. And again, put it so the cut edge is closest to you. Give it a little spritz. This you have to guesstimate where the center of it is because there is no line going across here to tell you. Fold the top down again to the diagonal line on the tool. Fold the other one down. And you will find that when you do this, it's not quite as exact as the prairie pointer, but it works. So that one would also be a way that you can do prairie points. I want to press that a little tighter there. Another use for prairie points is if you want to make a Christmas ornament. You start with 4 of them in the center. Add another row of 8 going around the outside edge, and then a 3rd row of 8. And then where the 2 come together, I placed a row of trim just to cover those edges. And you have a quick little nice Christmas ornament. I've used prairie points on the edge of this quilt completely. They're all done separately and then put in there and tucked inside each other. And they go around the quilt, and I put them in as part of my kind of a binding. This one I made with 80 different fabrics out of my stash for this quilt. But I like the prairie point edge on it. The other thing, another way to make prairie points, if you know you're going to want to do a whole edge of a quilt or a whole binding, is if you take and measure the length that you need and cut a strip of fabric that is that long and 4 times as wide as you want your prairie point to end up. So if this little prairie point ends up, say, 2.5 inches or whatever from here to here, 1.25, I would have to multiply that times 4, which would start with about a 5-inch strip of fabric. On that 5-inch strip of fabric, I'm going to unfold these for a moment, you mark your center line, and I did this 5 inches because I have a nice little ruler that measures that 5-inch piece into half. Draw a line down the center at 2.5 inches. Start at one edge, and with a marker or a pencil, make it 2.5 inches wide. Draw a line, move it down, draw a line, just on one side, so all the way down to the end. Then you would turn it over, and starting on this edge, I came in 1.25 inches. Other side of the ruler works better, because 1.25 is half of 2.5. And start my line here, and then continue lining them up at 2.5 inches all the way down the strip. Then I like to cut this with a scissor rather than a cutting wheel, because I sometimes go beyond the center with a cutting wheel and I don't want to do that. So you make all of your little slits, and then when you start to fold this, fold one, fold it back, go to the next one and fold it, go to the next one and fold it. And then if you fold these up, they will make your prairie points. I have one full strip folded already, so you can see that that's a very quick way of going down an entire edge of a quilt, because if you started out the length that you needed, it will fit in there. So that's another way of doing prairie points quickly. So just as a review, I used the prairie pointer from Susan Cleveland. I also could use the hot hammer with a diagonal mark on it. I used a little iron. That one works great for it. And then some magic basting spray or pressing spray to help them hold their creases. So if you think prairie points are a fun thing to do, give it a try. The instructions in the Susan K. Cleveland book are very, very clear. They're easy to follow, and it's a handy tool to have. I really enjoy using it. Thank you. Have a good day.